Elena Diaz wiped the sweat from her forehead as she pushed her cleaning cart down the empty hallway of Westfield Financial. The office building was quiet at 10 p.m., just how she liked it. For 3 years, she had worked as the night janitor here, cleaning floors, emptying trash cans, and dusting offices while the daytime employees slept. Tonight was just like any other night. Elena started on the first floor and worked her way up. By midnight, she reached the top floor where the executives had their offices. The carpet here was thicker, the furniture more expensive, and the views of the city more impressive. Mr. Thompson, the CEO, had the biggest office at the end of the hall. Elena always saved his office for last. She didn't like being in there. Something about the way he looked at her during the few times they had crossed paths made her uncomfortable. Just get it done quickly, she told herself as she unlocked his office door. Elena began her usual routine. She emptied the trash can, wiped down the desk, and vacuumed the carpet. Then she moved to dust the large wooden bookshelf that covered one wall. Mr. Thompson had many expensive-looking items displayed there, small statues, fancy pens, and framed photos of him with important people. As Elena carefully dusted around a small golden statue of a bull, her cleaning cloth caught its horn. The statue tipped over with a soft thud. Oh no! Elena quickly picked it up, checking for damage. Thankfully, it looked fine. But as she placed it back on the shelf, she heard a strange clicking sound. Elena froze. Had she broken something after all? She looked at the statue again, but it seemed perfectly intact. The clicking sound came again, and this time Elena realized it was coming from the wall behind the bookshelf. To her complete surprise, a small section of the wood paneling next to the bookshelf slowly slid open. Elena stepped back, her heart beating fast. A hidden compartment had appeared in the wall, about the size of a small safe. I shouldn't look, Elena whispered to herself, but curiosity got the better of her. She shined her small flashlight into the dark space. Inside were several folders neatly stacked on top of each other. Elena hesitated for a moment, then reached in and pulled out the top folder. She knew she shouldn't be looking through her boss's private things, but something told her this wasn't normal. The folder contained papers with numbers, names, and dates. Elena didn't understand most of it, but one name jumped out at her, Martinez. That was her former neighbor who had lost his house last year. He had told everyone that Westfield Financial had tricked him into a bad investment that took all his savings. Elena looked through more papers and saw more names she recognized from her neighborhood. All of them had lost money to Westfield Financial. With shaking hands, Elena put the folder back exactly as she had found it. She carefully took out her phone and snapped a few pictures of the documents, making sure everything was in focus. Just as she was about to close the compartment, she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. The elevator bell. Someone was coming to the floor. Elena quickly closed the hidden compartment, made sure the statue was back in its exact position, and grabbed her cleaning cart. Her heart was racing as she hurried toward the door. Who would be coming to the office at this hour? And what exactly had she discovered in that hidden compartment? Elena had a feeling that her life was about to change forever. Elena's hands trembled as she pushed her cleaning cart into the supply closet. She closed the door quietly and held her breath. Through the small crack, she could see a man walking down the hallway. It was Frank, one of the security guards who did rounds every few hours. "Just doing my rounds, Elena. Everything okay up here?" Frank called out, spotting her cleaning cart. "Yes, all good. Almost done for the night," Elena replied, trying to keep her voice steady. After Frank disappeared into the stairwell, Elena let out a long breath. She waited 5 more minutes before returning to Mr. Thompson's office. The hidden compartment was still there, exactly as she had left it. This time, Elena took out all the folders and laid them on the CEO's desk. There were 5 in total, each with different colored labels. The red one caught her eye first. Inside were lists of elderly people with large retirement accounts. Next to each name was a note saying Target with dollar amounts. "This can't be legal," Elena whispered to herself. The blue folder contained emails between Mr. Thompson and other executives. They talked about special clients and alternative investment strategies. One email made Elena's stomach turn. "These people don't understand financial terms. Tell them whatever they need to hear." Elena remembered Mrs. Garcia from church who had lost her husband's life insurance money in what she called a special investment opportunity at Westfield. The poor woman now cleaned houses to survive. The third folder, a green one, had photos of expensive houses, boats, and cars with names of executives next to them. Bonus acquisitions was written at the top of the page. These were things bought with money taken from innocent people. Elena worked quickly, taking photos of the most important documents with her phone. Her hands were sweating so much she worried she might damage the papers. The clock on the wall showed 1:30 a.m. She still had 3 more floors to clean before her shift ended at 5 o'clock a.m. Just as she was putting the folders back, Elena noticed something else in the compartment, a small USB drive. Without thinking twice, she pocketed it. Maybe it contained more evidence. After returning everything exactly as she had found it and closing the hidden compartment, Elena finished cleaning the office. Her mind was racing the whole time. What should she do with this information? Who could she trust? As Elena rode the elevator down to continue her cleaning duties, she thought about her 2 children at home with her mother. Thomas was 8 and Sophia just 6. This job paid for their small apartment, food, and school supplies. If she lost it, what would happen to them? But if she stayed silent, how many more people would lose their life savings to these criminals? People like her neighbors who worked hard their whole lives only to be tricked by men in expensive suits. When Elena finally got home at 6 o'clock a.m., her mother was already making breakfast for the kids. "You look tired, Mija. Everything okay?" her mother asked in Spanish. "Just a long night, Mama," Elena replied, kissing her children good morning. After breakfast and getting the kids off to school, Elena sat alone at her kitchen table. She plugged the USB drive into her old laptop. What she saw made her gasp. The drive contained spreadsheets tracking exactly how much money they had stolen from each victim and how they had hidden it from regulators. There were even recorded phone calls of salespeople lying to customers. Elena now had proof of a massive fraud happening at Westfield Financial. The question was, what would she do with it? If she reported it, she might lose her job. If she didn't, innocent people would keep losing their money. As she stared at her laptop screen, Elena made her decision. Some things were more important than job security. Some things were about right and wrong. Elena stared at her phone for a long time. The photos of the documents filled her gallery. The USB drive sat on the table next to a cup of cold coffee. It was now Sunday afternoon, and she hadn't slept properly since her discovery 2 nights ago. Her children played in the living room, laughing at a cartoon show. The sound normally brought her joy, but today her mind was too troubled to notice. "What are you looking at, Mama?" Sophia asked, suddenly appearing at her side. Elena quickly locked her phone. "Nothing, Mija. Just some work things." She forced a smile and stroked her daughter's hair. "Are you sad?" Sophia's big brown eyes looked up with concern. "No, sweetheart. Mama just has some grown-up problems to solve." Elena hugged her daughter close. "Go finish your show with Thomas." After Sophia returned to the living room, Elena opened her contacts. Her finger hovered over the name Maria Lopez. Maria was her cousin who worked as a secretary at the local newspaper. If anyone could help, it would be her. But what if this backfired? Elena had no savings, and jobs were hard to find. The faces of her children flashed in her mind. What kind of example would she set if she looked the other way? And how could she face Mrs. Garcia at church knowing she had done nothing to stop the people who stole her money? Elena put down her phone and walked to the window. Across the street, Mr. Martinez was working on his old car. Just last year, he had owned a nice house in a better neighborhood. Now he rented a small apartment and worked 2 jobs after losing everything to Westfield Financial. That was when Elena made her decision. She picked up her phone and called Maria. "I need to speak with someone at the newspaper," she said quietly. "It's important, very important." Maria arranged a meeting with a reporter named David Chen for later that afternoon. Elena asked her mother to watch the children and took the bus downtown. The newspaper building was bigger than Elena expected. She felt out of place in her simple clothes as people in business attire walked past her. At the reception desk, she asked for David Chen in a nervous voice. A few minutes later, a young man with glasses appeared. "Ms. Diaz? I'm David Chen. Maria said you have something important to share." They sat in a small meeting room. Elena's hands shook as she unlocked her phone and showed him the photos. "I clean at Westfield Financial," she explained. 2 nights ago, I found these documents in a hidden compartment in Mr. Thompson's office." David's eyes widened as he scrolled through the photos. Ms. Diaz, do you understand what you found? This is evidence of massive fraud. I know, Alina said. They are stealing from people who trust them. People like my neighbors. This could be the biggest financial story of the year, David said. But I need to ask, are you prepared for what might happen if we publish this? Your job could be at risk. Alina thought about her children again, about their future, about doing what was right. If I say nothing, they will hurt more people, she said firmly. I have to do this, but please, don't use my name. Not yet. David nodded. I understand. We can protect your identity as a source. I'll need to verify some of this information first, but if it checks out. He looked at her with respect. You're very brave, Ms. Diaz. As Alina left the newspaper building, she felt both terrified and relieved. What would happen when the story came out? Would they figure out it was her? How would she face going to work tomorrow night? On the bus ride home, Alina watched the city pass by outside the window. She thought about all the people who had lost their money, their homes, their dreams. Maybe her actions would help them get justice. Whatever happened next, Alina knew she had made the right choice. Some things were more important than safety. Some things were about standing up for what was right, even when it was scary. Alina watched the chaos unfold on her small television. Every local news channel showed the same scene. Federal agents in dark jackets with FBI printed on the back entering the Westfield Financial Building. Reporters crowded around the entrance, thrusting microphones toward anyone who came out. Mama, isn't that where you work? Thomas asked, pointing at the screen. He had come home from school to find his mother glued to the news. Yes, Mijo, Alina said quietly. Something bad happened there. Are you in trouble? Sophia asked, her eyes wide with worry. Alina hugged her daughter. No, sweetheart. Mama didn't do anything wrong. The people I work for might have done bad things. Her phone had been ringing all day. Coworkers called asking if she knew what was happening. Her supervisor called twice more to update her that the building would remain closed for at least 3 days while investigators collected evidence. They're interviewing everyone who works there, her supervisor had said. They'll probably want to talk to you too. The thought made Alina's stomach twist with anxiety. She wasn't good at lying. What if they asked her directly if she knew about the hidden compartment? Around dinner time, there was a knock at the door. Alana froze, her hand hovering over the pot of beans she was stirring. Was it the police? Had they somehow figured out she was the source? She opened the door cautiously to find Mr. Martinez standing there. Alina, have you seen the news? He asked, his face more animated than she had seen in months. Yes, I've been watching all day. They're saying we might get our money back, he said, his voice full of hope. The government is freezing all of Westfield's accounts. They found offshore accounts with millions of dollars that were stolen from clients. Alina smiled, feeling a wave of relief. That's wonderful news, Mr. Martinez. The reporter who broke the story said they had an inside source, Mr. Martinez continued. Someone brave who exposed everything. He looked at her with curious eyes. You work there at night, right? Did you ever see anything suspicious? Alina's heart beat faster. I just cleaned the offices, she said carefully. I don't know anything about the business side. After Mr. Martinez left, Alina received another call. This time it was from a number she didn't recognize. Ms. Diaz, this is Special Agent Wilson with the FBI. We'd like to speak with you about your employment at Westfield Financial. Alina's mouth went dry. Did I do something wrong? Not at all, the agent assured her. We're interviewing all employees, just routine questions. Could you come to our field office tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.? That night, Alina barely slept. She tossed and turned, imagining herself being questioned in a dark room with bright lights like in the police shows her mother watched. The next morning, after dropping her children at school, Alina took the bus downtown to the federal building. It was tall and intimidating with security guards at every entrance. Inside, Agent Wilson turned out to be a kind-looking woman in her 40s. She led Alina to a small but comfortable room. Ms. Diaz, how long have you worked at Westfield? Agent Wilson asked. 3 years, Alina replied. I clean the offices at night. And do you ever interact with the executives? No, they're never there when I work. Sometimes I see Mr. Thompson leaving as I arrive, but we don't talk. The agent nodded, taking notes. In your duties, do you clean Mr. Thompson's office? Alina's heart raced. Yes, I clean all the offices. Have you ever noticed anything unusual in his office? Anything that seemed out of place or suspicious? This was the moment. Elena took a deep breath. I just clean. I don't look through papers or anything. Agent Wilson looked at her for a long moment. Then she slid a photo across the table. It showed the bookshelf with the hidden compartment open. Ms. Diaz, we know someone accessed this compartment recently. The security cameras in the hallway show you were the only person who entered that office after hours this week. Elena's hands began to shake. She looked down at the table, unable to meet the agent's eyes. Agent Wilson's voice softened. You're not in trouble, Ms. Diaz. In fact, if you helped expose this fraud, you did something very brave. Tears filled Elena's eyes as she finally looked up. My neighbors lost everything because of those men, she whispered. I had to do something. Monday morning arrived too quickly. Elena had barely slept, her mind racing with worries about her meeting with the reporter. She prepared breakfast for her children as usual, trying to appear normal despite the storm inside her. Mama, you look tired, Thomas said, munching on his toast. I'm fine, Mito, Elena replied with a forced smile. Just thinking about work. After dropping the kids at school, Elena went home and collapsed on her bed. Her shift wouldn't start until 9 p.m., but she was already exhausted from worry. What if she had made a terrible mistake? She finally fell into a restless sleep. Elena's phone rang at 3 p.m., startling her awake. It was David Chen, the reporter. Ms. Diaz, I've verified enough of your information, he said, his voice excited. We're running the story tomorrow morning. The evidence you provided shows clear fraud patterns at Westfield Financial. Elena's heart pounded in her chest. Did you keep my name out of it? Absolutely. We're only referring to you as a source within the company. But you should be prepared. They might start an internal investigation to find out who leaked this information. After hanging up, Elena paced around her small apartment. Should she call in sick tonight? No, that might make her look suspicious. Better to go to work and act normal. When Elena arrived at Westfield Financial that night, everything seemed the same. The security guard nodded at her as usual. The offices were empty and quiet. She started her cleaning routine on the first floor, but her hands trembled as she worked. Around midnight, her phone buzzed with a text from David. Story is ready. Publishing at 6 a.m. Thank you for your courage. Elena took a deep breath and continued cleaning. When she reached the executive floor, she hesitated outside Mr. Thompson's office. What if he had discovered someone had accessed his secret files? Would there be cameras she hadn't noticed before? Taking another deep breath, Elena unlocked the door and entered. The office looked exactly the same. She cleaned it quickly, avoiding looking at the bookshelf with the secret compartment. Every noise made her jump. By 5 a.m., Elena had finished her shift without incident. As she left the building, the sky was just beginning to lighten. In 1 hour, the story would break, and everything would change. At home, Elena sat at her kitchen table with a cup of coffee, watching the clock. At exactly 6 a.m., she opened the newspaper's website on her phone. The headline made her gasp. FROUD XPOSD. Est file de financial executivs at stus of stealing millions from vulnerable clients. The article detailed how Westfield had specifically targeted elderly and immigrant populations, promising impossible returns on investments while secretly funneling money to offshore accounts. David had included quotes from the documents she had photographed and mentioned the secret records hidden in the CEO's office. By 7 a.m., other news outlets had picked up the story. Elena's phone pinged with a message from Maria. It's everywhere. TV News is talking about it too. At 8 a.m., Elena's supervisor called. Elena, don't come in tonight, she said, her voice tense. The office is crazy right now. There are reporters everywhere, and the police just arrived with investigators. They're sending everyone home while they search the building. What's happening? Elena asked, pretending not to know. It's bad, really bad. Someone leaked documents showing Mr. Thompson and others were stealing money. They're saying it could be millions of dollars. I've never seen anything like this. After hanging up, Elena sat in silence. The weight of what she had done finally hit her. There was no going back now. People's lives would change because of her discovery, including her own. As she watched her children eat breakfast before school, Elena wondered what tomorrow would bring. Would she still have a job? Would the truth finally help people like Mr. Martinez get justice? Only time would tell. But deep in her heart, Elena knew she had done the right thing. "I think we should continue this conversation with your lawyer present," Agent Wilson said, closing her notebook. Elena's eyes widened with fear. "Lawyer? I can't afford a lawyer." "Don't worry," Agent Wilson reassured her. "As a potential whistleblower, you're entitled to legal protection. We can arrange for someone to represent you at no cost." 2 hours later, Elena sat in the same room with Agent Wilson and a kind-faced woman named Ms. Patel, who introduced herself as an attorney specializing in whistleblower cases. "Ms. Diaz, you're in a unique position," Ms. Patel explained. "The information you discovered has helped expose one of the largest financial fraud cases in the city's history. There are laws to protect people like you." Elena twisted her hands in her lap. "Will I lose my job?" "That's what we need to discuss," Agent Wilson said. "We'd like you to tell us exactly what happened from the beginning." With her lawyer nodding encouragingly, Elena finally shared the whole story, finding the hidden compartment, photographing the documents, taking the USB drive, and contacting the newspaper. "I just wanted to help people like Mr. Martinez," she finished, wiping away tears. "I didn't think about what would happen to me." "You did the right thing," Ms. Patel said. "And there's something important you should know. Whistleblowers who help expose financial fraud are sometimes entitled to a percentage of the money recovered." Elena looked up in surprise. "What does that mean?" "It means," Agent Wilson explained, "that if your information helps us recover the stolen money, which is looking like tens of millions of dollars, you could receive a significant reward, up to 30% in some cases." Elena couldn't believe what she was hearing. "But what happens now? Everyone will know it was me." "Not necessarily," Ms. Patel said. "Your identity can remain protected throughout much of this process." As they continued talking, Elena's phone buzzed with a text from her supervisor. "Meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. All cleaning staff. Very important." Elena showed the message to Agent Wilson and Ms. Patel. This could be about layoffs, Elena worried. With the company in trouble, they might start cutting jobs. Or, Ms. Patel suggested, they might be trying to figure out who the whistleblower is. "Let's prepare you for this meeting." The next morning, Elena arrived at a hotel conference room where Westfield had set up temporary offices. Her hands were shaking as she joined the other cleaning staff in a small meeting room. Her supervisor, Mrs. Reynolds, looked tired and stressed. Next to her sat a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as Mr. Campbell from the company's legal department. "As you all know, Westfield Financial is facing serious allegations," Mr. Campbell began. "The board of directors has removed Mr. Thompson and several other executives while the investigation continues." Elena kept her eyes down, afraid her face might give something away. "We have reason to believe," Mr. Campbell continued, "that someone on the cleaning staff may have found important documents and shared them with the media." The room went silent. Elena could feel people looking around, wondering who it might be. "I want to make something very clear," Mrs. Reynolds said, standing up. "If anyone here knows anything about this situation, you should come forward now." Elena's heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. She had rehearsed this moment with Agent Wilson and Ms. Patel, but now that it was happening, she felt frozen with fear. "The company is offering protection for any whistleblower," Mr. Campbell added. "No job loss, no retaliation." Mrs. Reynolds looked directly at Elena. "Elena, you clean the executive floor. Did you notice anything unusual recently?" All eyes turned to her. Elena took a deep breath, remembering what her lawyer had advised. "I found something," she said quietly, "in Mr. Thompson's office." The room erupted in whispers. Mr. Campbell leaned forward with interest. "And what did you do with what you found?" Elena hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. "I reported it to the authorities, because it was the right thing to do." The room fell completely silent after Elena's confession. Everyone stared at her with wide eyes and open mouths. For several long seconds, nobody moved or spoke. Then Mrs. Reynolds did something unexpected. She started clapping. I knew it, she said, a smile spreading across her face. I knew it had to be someone with integrity. Mr. Campbell looked surprised by this reaction but quickly composed himself. Ms. Diaz, the company's interim management would like to speak with you privately after this meeting. The other cleaning staff members looked at Alana with new eyes. Some seemed impressed, others confused, and a few appeared worried about their own jobs. What happens to the rest of us? Asked George. Would work there even longer than Elena. Will we still have jobs? Yes, Mr. Campbell assured them. The company will continue operating under temporary management while the investigation proceeds. Your jobs are secure. After the meeting, Elena was led to a larger conference room where 3 people waited for her. One was a woman she recognized as Karen Hayes, the company's head of operations who had always been polite to the cleaning staff. The others were men in suits she didn't recognize. Ms. Diaz, said one of the men, extending his hand. I'm Robert Wilson, newly appointed interim CEO. This is Thomas Baker from the board of directors. Elena shook their hands nervously. Am I in trouble? Karen Hayes smiled kindly. Quite the opposite, Elena. You've done this company a great service. I have. Elena couldn't hide her surprise. Many of us had suspicions about Mr. Thompson and his inner circle, Karen explained. But they were very careful to keep their illegal activities hidden. Without your discovery, they might have continued stealing for years. Robert Wilson nodded in agreement. The board has removed all executives involved in the fraud. We're cooperating fully with the authorities to make things right for our clients. Thomas Baker leaned forward. Ms. Diaz, we'd like to offer you a new position within the company. Elena blinked in confusion. But I'm just a cleaner. You've demonstrated exceptional character and judgment, Karen said. We need people like you to help rebuild trust in this company. We're offering you the position of facilities manager, Mr. Wilson explained. You would oversee all building maintenance, cleaning staff, and security. The salary is 3 times what you currently make, with regular daytime hours and full benefits. Elena couldn't believe what she was hearing. But I don't have experience managing people. Mrs. Reynolds has agreed to help train you, Karen said. She believes you're more than capable. Elena's mind raced. More money, better hours, health insurance for her children. It was everything she had dreamed of, but never thought possible. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Karen encouraged her. You deserve this opportunity. That evening, Elena walked into her apartment with a new employee badge and contract papers in her hand. Her mother was preparing dinner while the children did homework at the table. Mama, why are you home so early? Sophia asked. Elena sat down and gathered her family around her. I have something important to tell you all. She explained what had happened over the past week in simple terms the children could understand. She told them about finding the secret compartment, about the bad people taking money that didn't belong to them, and about her decision to tell the truth. So you're like a superhero? Thomas asked, his eyes wide with excitement. Elena laughed. No, Mijo, I just did what was right. And now you have a better job? Her mother asked, looking at the papers in Elena's hand. Yes, Mama. Better hours, more money. I'll be able to pick up the kids from school myself. Maybe even save for Thomas and Sophia to go to college someday. Her mother wiped away tears. Your father would be so proud of you, Elena. That night, Elena received a text message from David Chen, the reporter. Have you seen the evening news? They're calling you the janitor hero, but still not using your name. Want to share your side of the story now? Elena thought about it for a long moment before replying. Not yet. Maybe someday. Right now, I just want to focus on my family and new job. As she tucked her children into bed that night, Elena felt a peace she hadn't known in years. Sometimes, doing the right thing came with a heavy price. But this time, courage had been rewarded. 1 year had passed since the day Elena found the hidden compartment in Mr. Thompson's office. The city courthouse was crowded as people gathered for the final sentencing hearing. Elena sat in the back row, dressed in a simple but professional blue suit that she had bought with her new salary. Nervous? Asked Mrs. Reynolds, who sat beside her. The older woman had become a mentor and friend over the past year. A little, Elena admitted. She glanced around the courtroom, spotting many familiar faces. Several former Westfield employees were there, along with dozens of people who had lost money in the fraud scheme. Mr. Martinez sat just 2 rows ahead. He turned and gave Elena a small wave. His life had changed dramatically in the past year. With the money recovered from the fraud, he had received enough to put a down payment on a new house and start a small business. The judge entered the courtroom, and everyone stood. Elena watched as Mr. Thompson and 5 other former executives were led in wearing handcuffs. They looked much different now. No expensive suits, no confident smiles, just defeated men facing the consequences of their actions. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Williams," the bailiff announced. The sentencing took nearly 2 hours. When it was over, Mr. Thompson received 15 years in prison. The others got between 8 and 12 years. They were also ordered to pay back all the money they had stolen, plus additional fines. As people filed out of the courtroom, Elena felt a strange mix of emotions. She wasn't happy about the men going to jail, but she was relieved that justice had been served. Outside on the courthouse steps, Elena was surprised to see David Chen, the reporter who had first published the story. "Ms. Diaz," he called out, "would you consider giving an interview now? People still talk about the janitor hero who exposed the biggest financial fraud in our city's history." Elena hesitated. For a full year, she had declined all interviews, preferring to stay out of the spotlight while she adjusted to her new role at Westfield Financial, now renamed Integrity Financial Services. "I think it's time," Mrs. Reynolds encouraged her. "Your story could inspire others to speak up when they see wrongdoing." Elena nodded slowly. "Okay, but just a short interview." As they set up for the interview on a bench near the courthouse, Elena thought about how much her life had changed. Her new position as facilities manager had been challenging at first, but she had grown into the role. Her children were thriving with the stability her new job provided. She had even started taking night classes to earn a business degree. "Ms. Diaz," David began, "a year ago, you were working as a night janitor when you discovered evidence of massive fraud. What made you decide to come forward?" Elena thought carefully before answering. "I kept thinking about my neighbors who had lost everything. And I thought about what kind of example I wanted to set for my children. I was scared of losing my job, but I was more scared of what would happen if I said nothing." "Did you ever imagine your life would change so dramatically?" Elena smiled. "Never. I was just doing what felt right." What would you say to someone else who finds themselves in a similar position, seeing something wrong but afraid to speak up? "I would tell them that doing the right thing isn't always easy," Elena said. "But living with yourself afterward is much easier when you know you did what was right, even when it was hard." After the interview, Elena walked home instead of taking the bus. The spring air felt fresh, and she wanted time to think. As she passed by the building where she used to clean floors in the middle of the night, she looked up at the top floor where Mr. Thompson's office had been. One small discovery had changed everything, not just for her, but for hundreds of people who had been victims of the fraud. That evening, as Elena helped her children with homework at their kitchen table, Sophia looked up from her math problems. "Mama, my teacher showed us your interview on the news today," she said proudly. "She told the class that my mother is a hero." Elena hugged her daughter close. "I'm not a hero, Maija. I'm just someone who found a secret and decided to tell the truth." But as she looked around at her family and thought about all the people who had gotten justice because of her actions, Elena knew that sometimes ordinary people could do extraordinary things. All it took was the courage to do what was right, even when it was frightening. In the end, that was the most important lesson she could teach her children.